Disclaimer asterisk: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I shouldn't have stayed that long. But when she opened the door, barefoot, her hair still damp from a shower, eyes narrowing in surprise, it felt impossible to leave. The book was just an excuse. A thin paperback I'd borrowed weeks ago, one I barely remembered reading. I told myself I'd drop it off, say thanks, and walk away. But the second her hand brushed mine as she took it, something in the air shifted, soft, unspoken, and dangerously familiar. Her living room smelled faintly of jasmine and coffee gone cold. A lamp threw a warm, uneven light across the room, leaving half her face in shadow. She leaned against the arm of the couch, arms folded, like she was trying to decide whether to let me stay or tell me to go. "You could have just left it by the door," she said, but her tone didn't match her words. "I know," I answered, but it didn't feel right. For a while, neither of us moved. The only sound was the ticking clock above the window and the way her breath slowed every time mine caught. She motioned toward the couch. "You can sit if you want." I did, too close maybe, though neither of us mentioned it. She sat beside me, one leg tucked under her, and the space between us shrank until I could feel the warmth from her skin. Every accidental brush, her knee against mine, her fingers grazing the cushion near my hand, felt intentional. We talked about nothing at first. The book, the weather, the new neighbors. But under every word was something heavier. A pulse neither of us could ignore. She laughed softly once, then caught herself, as if realizing how intimate even that small sound had become. When she stood to refill her glass, her shoulder brushed my cheek. I turned slightly, just enough that she froze, close enough that I could see the quick rise of her chest, the tremor in her throat. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, a held breath that could turn into anything. And that's when it happened, the moment that changed everything, the reason I still can't forget that night. The room had grown quieter somehow, as if even the clock had stopped listening. She came back with 2 glasses of wine, her hand trembling just enough that the surface rippled. "I don't usually drink on weeknights," she murmured. "Then maybe tonight's not usual," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes lingered on mine for a heartbeat too long. Then she smiled, small, reluctant, but real, and handed me the glass. Her fingers brushed my wrist. Warm, lingering. We sat again, side by side this time. The couch cushions dipped under our weight, drawing us closer until the space between us barely existed. The dim lamplight softened her face, the curve of her lips, the faint line of tiredness around her eyes. She asked about my music, about where I'd been all these years. I tried to answer, but every time she tilted her head or tucked her hair behind her ear, the words slipped away. It wasn't what she said. It was how she listened, how her silence pulled me in. At one point, she laughed, quiet, breathy, and reached out, touching my forearm as if to steady herself. Her touch stayed longer than the laughter. I didn't move. "Sorry," she whispered, though her hand didn't fall away. "For what?" "For..." She stopped, searching for a word that never came. The air grew heavier. My pulse matched the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room. She shifted slightly, her knee brushing mine again. Not by accident this time. Outside, rain began tapping against the window, slow and uneven. It made the moment feel sealed off, like the world had folded itself around this small apartment. She reached for her glass again but missed it by an inch. I caught it first, our fingers locking around the stem. Neither of us let go. "Thanks," she said, but her voice had changed, lower, unsteady. "Anytime." The word hung there, too heavy for what it meant. She leaned back, her shoulder just grazing mine, and neither of us pulled away. The rain deepened, a soft percussion behind the quiet. For a long while we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The space between words had already said too much. And then, a pause, a breath, the faintest shift closer. That's when I realized we were no longer pretending nothing was happening. Something was about to break the silence. The storm outside had settled into a steady rhythm, soft and relentless. like a second heartbeat beneath the quiet. The lamp's glow had dimmed, and the room was caught in a half-light, shadows breathing against the walls. She sat turned toward me now, her knees drawn up, glass forgotten on the table. There was a nervous stillness in her hands. She kept brushing her thumb over the rim of her sleeve, as if grounding herself. "I should probably go," I said, though my voice didn't sound convincing. "Probably," she echoed, almost to herself. Neither of us moved. Her eyes searched mine, steady but uncertain, and for a moment it felt like the entire night balanced on that thin thread of silence. She exhaled softly, the kind of breath that comes right before a decision. When she leaned forward, I thought she was reaching for the book again, maybe to place it aside. But her hand stopped midway, fingers trembling slightly, as if even that small distance carried too much meaning. I could feel the warmth of her skin without her touching me. "We're being foolish," she said quietly, her voice rough around the edges. "Yeah," I whispered. "I know." Still, neither of us looked away. The distance between us wasn't more than a breath now. Every movement, the rise of her chest, the small tremor at the corner of her mouth, felt amplified, impossible to ignore. Her hair slipped over one shoulder, brushing my arm, and I felt the pulse in my throat quicken. I didn't reach out, but I didn't lean back either. We were caught there, suspended, two people trying not to want what was already happening. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, low and drawn out. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, as if the sound had touched something inside her. "I don't think this should," she started, but the words faded. Her voice hung in the air, unfinished, trembling, and the silence that followed felt alive, waiting. The next breath could have been a step forward or a retreat. Neither of us knew which it would be. The rain had deepened into a steady roar, pressing against the windows like a secret that wanted out. The lights flickered once, and the room seemed to shrink in the half-dark. The two of us suspended in that narrow space between impulse and restraint. Her hand was still half-raised when our eyes met again. Neither of us spoke, but something unspoken tightened between us. Every sound, the clock, the rain, the faint creak of the couch, seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as our breathing. I could see the quick beat of her pulse at her throat. She swallowed hard, and her voice came out low, nearly a whisper. "You should really go before." "Before what?" The sentence hung there, unfinished. I moved without thinking, just a shift closer. A breath that wasn't mine caught between us. Her breath hitched. The warmth from her body radiated through the thin space left. The air smelled of rain and her perfume, something faintly floral and impossible to ignore. When she turned her head slightly, the light caught the curve of her cheek, the glint of uncertainty in her eyes. For a moment, she seemed about to speak again, but instead she let out a small, uneven breath and stood. The sudden movement sent a shiver through the air. She paced once, twice, then stopped behind the couch, hands gripping the edge as if steadying herself. "This is complicated," she murmured. "Yeah," I said. "It is." She looked back at me, and that single glance carried every word we hadn't said. Then she stepped forward again, slow, deliberate, until the space between us disappeared. I could feel the tension humming off her like static. Another flicker of light, another heartbeat. She reached up, fingers trembling just short of contact. My breath caught, hers faltered. We stayed like that, so close the air itself seemed to throb, both of us knowing that the next motion would tip everything over. The storm outside cracked, thunder rolling through the floorboards. She didn't flinch, neither did I, and in that instant, right before anything could happen, the sound of a knock at the door shattered the silence. The moment broke, but the echo of it didn't fade. The knock came again, 3 slow, deliberate taps that didn't belong to the storm. She froze. Her hand hovered in the air, still inches from my chest. The sound seemed to stretch the room wider, sharper, filling it with a different kind of electricity. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked, my voice too low. She shook her head once. "No. No one ever comes this late." The rain hammered harder, masking whoever waited on the other side. She stood there for a long moment, her eyes darting toward the door and then back to me. I saw it, the war inside her. The wish to answer, the wish not to move at all. The knock came again, louder. She straightened suddenly, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "Stay here," she said. But her tone was all tension, no command. I watched as she crossed the room, every step hesitant. The lamplight trailed behind her, catching on the framed photos along the hallway wall. Her ex-husband, a younger version of her. An empty space where one picture had clearly been removed. When she reached the door, she hesitated. The handle clicked. The door opened only a few inches. A man's voice, muffled, familiar, spoke from outside. "You left your car lights on." Her breath caught. I couldn't see his face, but something in the way she stood, rigid, shoulders squared, told me this wasn't a stranger. "Thanks," she said quickly, too quickly. "I'll handle it." The door shut again. Silence. When she turned back to me, her face had changed. The warmth from before had drained away, replaced by something raw and uncertain. "Who was that?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked past me, picked up the half-empty glasses, and set them in the sink with trembling hands. "No one," she said finally, but the word didn't convince either of us. I stood, closing the space between us again. "You're shaking." "It's nothing," she murmured. He used to live here. He still checks in sometimes." Her voice faltered on "used to." I didn't ask who he was. I didn't have to. The pieces fit too easily. Outside, a flash of headlights swept across the window, lingering before fading into the rain. She flinched as though burned. For a heartbeat, we were both motionless, trapped between the echo of what almost happened and the danger of what still might. Then she looked up at me, eyes wide, pleading. "You shouldn't have come tonight." "I know," I said, "but I'm still here." She closed her eyes, a small shudder running through her. "Then promise me something," she whispered. "If he comes back, don't say a word." The thunder rolled again, closer this time, and her hand found mine, cold, desperate. The door rattled once more. This time there was no knock, just the sound of the handle turning. The door handle turned, but didn't open. It jiggled once, then stopped. The silence that followed was sharper than any thunder. She backed away from the entry, her breath shallow, one hand pressed to her lips. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Outside, rain hissed across the porch roof. Then a voice, steady, low male, called through the crack. "Claire," it said. "I know you're not alone." She froze. My name wasn't spoken, but the tone carried recognition. She whispered, "Don't move." A chill rolled through me. Her ex-husband. It had to be. She opened the door an inch. "You need to leave," she said softly. "Please." The voice laughed, bitter and exhausted. "You said that before. But here you are again, doing this." He stepped forward, and for a moment I thought he would force his way in. But then he stopped, staring at me over her shoulder. Rain streaked down his face, making it hard to tell if he was crying or just soaked through. "This is how you move on," he said. "With him." I couldn't speak. The storm cracked overhead, spilling light across the room. For the first time, I saw her face clearly, torn open, not with guilt but with something closer to defiance. "Go home," she said. "This isn't your house anymore." He looked at her, then at me, and for a long second, the air felt like it might shatter. Then he turned and walked into the rain, leaving the door wide open behind him. The wind rushed in, cold and wild, scattering papers, toppling the empty wine glasses. She slammed the door shut and leaned against it, trembling. "That's what I was afraid of," she whispered. "He never lets go." When she looked up at me again, the distance that had held us apart all night finally broke. Not from desire, but from everything they'd both been holding in. Years of regret, anger, loneliness bursting through at once. I reached out to steady her, but she pulled something from her sweater pocket, a small silver key, and pressed it into my palm. "Keep it," she said. If he comes back, use it. I looked down at the key. It wasn't hers. It was his. And before I could ask, she whispered almost to herself. He never took it off his keyring. The wind howled again, rattling the windows. Somewhere outside, an engine started, then stopped. The story hadn't ended after all. The key felt heavier than it should have. Even as the storm softened outside, its weight pressed against my palm, cool and silent. A reminder of everything that had almost happened, and everything that still could. She stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring into the street where headlights once were. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Someone younger, freer, but burdened by a past that refused to stay buried. He'll come back, I said quietly. I know. Her voice was calm now, almost detached. He always does. That's the problem. The rain tapered into a drizzle, the night settling into that fragile quiet after chaos. I took a step toward her, and she didn't move away this time. Her breathing steadied. Mine didn't. The space between us still hummed. Not with the same kind of heat as before, but something deeper, rawer. When she finally turned, her eyes found mine. Tired, grateful, and searching. You should go, she said. But there was no sharpness in it now. Just truth. Before this becomes something we both regret. I don't think I would, I admitted. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. That's exactly why you should. For a moment, the room felt suspended again. Two people caught in a loop of almosts and never agains. Then she reached out, brushed her fingers lightly across my wrist, and took the key from my hand. Maybe I just needed someone to remind me I still have choices, she whispered. And then, softer, thank you. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything left to say. I opened the door, letting the cold air spill in, and stepped out into the damp, quiet street. Behind me, I heard the faint click of her lock turning. The sound was final, but not hopeless, like a door closing to protect something still alive inside. When I looked back once, the light in her window flickered and went dark. Still, as I walked away, I could feel the warmth of that room, of her nearness, burning quietly beneath the rain. Some stories don't end. They just stay with you, breathing in the silence long after you leave.